Welcome back to another video tutorial. In this video, we're going to look at two of the activities, one known as hot spaces and the other known as hot spots. Now, just as the names imply, these two activities are very similar. So we're going to see how to create them and most specifically how to add background images to them because that's going to be very important in how they actually perform. And the first thing that I want to do is get a quick look at how the hotspots activity actually behaves so that you'll understand as we get into it what this activity will look like. So you can see in the video that they are dragging labels, in this case letters, to the animals based on which letter they start with. And this would be an example of hot spots. And those small yellow dots that are on the animals would represent the spots in the hotspots activity. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this. We got a quick look at it. And now let's take a look at how to build one of these. And I am going to begin with hotspots. Just as we've done with previous activities, let's take a look at what's on the page before we start creating. Step one is where we're going to give our activities a title. And just like we did with some of the other activities like multiple choice and addition plus, you could have one activity where they drag the labels to the spots, followed by a second one, followed by a third, and they would all be listed here on the left underneath of your activity. So it doesn't have to be one background that they put their spots on and then they move on to a completely different activity. They can have a variety of things that they would do within the hotspots application before they move on. Step two down here is going to be to create a background image of some kind. And we have those same options that we've seen previously. We can bring in an image from our own files. We can bring in from the Smart Gallery. We can paste an image if we've copied something from some other source. And then, of course, if you bring in something and you're not happy with it, your red X down here would allow you to delete that and get back to just this plain blue background. Moving back up to the top in the center of our screen, we see step three is where we set up the activities. And this is where we're going to create our labels. Now, if you click on this button right here that just says label, you'll get the option to type text. As we saw in our brief example there, they had simply typed letters for each of their labels. But if you wanted a picture for your label instead of text, you have those same four options again: pictures from your file, Smart's Gallery, paste, or remove an image that you've put in there. And as always, you have the option to attach audio. So if you did have picture labels and your students needed some assistance, perhaps when they click on something, they could be told that it's a picture of a monkey or a square or whatever the image was. Down here at the bottom, we see the same option that we've seen in all of the applications that we've gone through, and that is the option to add instructions. Always maximum of 45 characters, but when you record your audio, you can go with more if you need more detailed instructions for your students. So let's go ahead and begin a sample activity here. And I'm going to call this human body for our first example. Moving on to step two down here, I'm going to go ahead and go to Smart's Gallery and show you the option that we have. So if I were looking for some kind of a background image, I could search and locate some image of the human body. And perhaps in this activity, I'm going to have my students label some parts of the body here. So I've added just the top half. We'll just do the top half of the human body. So I've got my background image in, and now I'm ready to add labels. And I'm going to do text labels for this example. I'll show you a picture example in a few minutes. So when I click to add a label, it appears down here at the bottom of the screen. If I click label again, you can see that as it adds labels, it just randomly distributes them around the outside edges. And as we get to the top of the screen, the labels actually come in upside down. And this is unusual for us working on our desktop computers. We're not used to seeing things upside down, or certainly not on purpose. We would promptly turn them over. But you have to remember that when this image is displayed on the table, There really isn't anything upside down. What I'm currently seeing as the top of my screen would simply be the other side of the table, and students on that side would see these as right side up. So we'll talk about that when we're building a background image in a moment, but when you're in this particular activity, as you move a label from the bottom to the top of the screen or the top to the bottom of the screen, it automatically rotates to be in the correct position for a student that would possibly be positioned on that side of the table. And we can see the same thing as we drag a label from the left-hand side to the right-hand side of the screen. So right now we've got all these great labels there, but they don't actually say anything about the human body. So the way that we change them from saying label 1, label 2, etc., is just to double click, and then we can type on the label whatever we would like it to say. So I'm just going to have a label that says arm. And then what I do is I essentially create the answer key. So I'm going to place this right here in the center of the arm, right here in the bend of the arm. And when the students see this on the table, what they're going to see is one of those yellow dots right where I chose to place this label. So I'm going to do my next one. I'm going to label this one as wrist. And I'm going to drag that over here and place it right there. Let's do the third one. Let's have this one torso. Drag that right into the middle. The fourth one can say chest. And so on as we go across with the labels. Doesn't matter which order. In fact, if I decide after I just threw all these labels out there that I don't want one, I can click over here on label number 5. See how it's got a slightly thicker white line around the outside? I can delete it. And I have just removed label number 5 because I realized I don't need quite as many labels as I placed out here. So we'll change this one to head, slide it over here, and then we'll delete the remaining 2 that we added. Once again, you have that option to add audio. So if I click on one of these, I can come up here to audio and I can have it read the item's label. That would be the table reading it. I could have it spell it if that were appropriate to have it say ARM. And of course, the import audio option always gives us that microphone so that I could record it right now if I were concerned about the way the table would pronounce the word arm or some other example. So at this point, I have completed a hotspots activity for my students with all of these labels. And of course, we can preview these. Remember from the previous videos that your previews will open in your web browser, so you want to be certain that you're connected to the web whenever you choose preview. And here it should be loading for us any moment. And this is what the students will see on the table. So every place that I placed a label, we now have a yellow spot, and the labels themselves have just been randomly thrown to the outside corners of the table. And the students would select on each and drag them over, and when they click onto the correct spot, they change color. If they don't click and don't change color, then the students have the wrong label in the wrong place. So right here, as I jiggle this around, this is not the head, and that's why it won't click into place. Move it up there, and it clicks. So once again, we're getting that instant feedback. When it clicks and stays into place and changes color, the students know that they have it correct. So I'm going to close out of my preview window. Now this is one example of how you can do a hotspots activity, but this is an example where I'm labeling a pre-created image. For example, I knew I wanted the students to label parts of the human body, and I can find thousands, if not millions, of images of the human body. What if I wanted the students to do something similar to what we saw in our example for I wanted them to label all these different animals. Well, I could spend hours searching the web for a picture with all kinds of different animals that I might want them to label, especially animals that are arranged in this, 360-degree pattern facing in all different directions. So one of the things that you may frequently find that you need to do in order to create a hotspots or hot spaces activity is actually build your own background. And this is one of the things that I wish the table allowed you to create these backgrounds, and unfortunately, it isn't a feature that's currently included in the table. If you need to custom build a background, like something with all of those animals arranged in 360-degree, then you're going to need another program to do that. And I actually prefer to use Smart Notebook. It's easy. If you're a Smart Table user, chances are you've also got Smart Notebook available in your school or district. So I like to use Smart Notebook to create all of my backgrounds. So my Smart Notebook is opening right now. And once we get that open, I'll show you how you can add your images into Smart Notebook and then bring them into the table for a custom created background. So here we have Smart Notebook open, and we're ready to begin building a background. So just like I had the gallery available when I was in the toolkit, I can also search for images from inside of the Smart Gallery, or I could copy and paste images in from the web. Just to make it easier, I'm going to find some images that I know exist here inside of Smart. So I'm going to create a quick background using some different animal pictures, just as we saw. I'm going to begin with a monkey. Let's get a dog. Very eclectic collection of animals here. And let's do one more. Okay. So if we're going to add this as a background image for the Smart Table, we want to have our pictures well distributed all around so that they fit and fill out the table really well. But we also want them arranged in that 360-degree view so that the students on the far side of the table don't see all of the content as upside down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these animals in all different directions. And there I have a very quick, simple example of a background that will fill the whole table and is arranged in that 360-degree view that we want. Now, I could choose to save this as a JPEG, export it as an image file, something along those lines, but I feel like it's a lot easier since one of the options that I have, I'm going back into hotspots here, for my background is to paste. What I actually really like to do is just copy it from Notebook. So I'm going to come up to here and I'm going to add step one, I'm going to add a second activity. And for this one, we're going to call it animals. And now I'm ready for step two, where I'm going to create my background. So I've already created it here in Notebook, and I'm going to highlight around all of these animals that I added to the page, and I'm going to copy this. So I'm going to use my desktop shortcut, that Control C, and go back to my Smart Table, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to choose Paste. And just as it's done with the images we've seen in previous videos, it's going to show us a crop option on the left-hand side and then what that crop currently looks like on the right. So I want to make sure I've got all my animals included before I click OK. And now my background fills the table completely, but I've custom created it to include exactly the items that I want. And from here, I can go through and complete the labels exactly as I did before. Double click on this one and type in monkey, and then simply set the answer key that this is where this label belongs. Add a second label. Label 3, and so on. And place our last label here, and we'll just call this a fish. So very easy to create your own backgrounds, especially if you have Smart Notebook. Great for finding images from the gallery. Simply drop them on the page, highlight everything, copy it, paste it in to step 2 where you're creating your background, add your labels, and your activity is completely done. So let's get out of hotspots and let's go look at hot spaces and see the difference here. So in our hot spaces activity, instead of a spot where they put a label, they're going to have regions or zones or spaces. So for example, I'll take this rectangle here and I'll simply draw a rectangle. And what they would place into this rectangle is whatever fits this category. So let's say, for example, I wanted them to put everything that's round in the circle and everything that's square in the rectangle. But again, we need some kind of a background so that the students know what they're supposed to do, some kind of instructions for what they're supposed to place. So just like hotspots requires some kind of a background, so does hot spaces. But in hot spaces, you're going to find almost 100% of the time that you're going to be creating your own backgrounds, because I'm not going to find anything on the web that says drag square items here and drag circular items here. I'm going to have to create that sort of background on my own. So I'm going to go ahead and click on these that I've drawn and delete them so that we can start over again. And click on the oval here and click my red X to remove that one as well. So once again, I prefer to create my backgrounds in Smart Notebook. So I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to delete the animals that are on the page because I don't want them for this particular example. Rather, what I'm going to use for this example is I'm going to create shapes that are going to be a part of my background. And I'm just going to choose a light color that text will show up over top of easily. And I'm going to draw a large rectangle in one corner and a second rectangle in the other corner. One thing I did want to do was I wanted to make the outline color the same, and I wanted to make the second rectangle a different color, so I'm going to go ahead and change that. Okay, so we've now got two rectangles, one in the upper left and one in the lower right. And what I want to do is I want to add some text labels to these rectangles. So I'm just going to select my text tool. I'm going to pick a student-friendly font here, and I'm going to type in mammals. Today's demonstrations are going to be all about animals. And remember, always make some things upside down and sideways when you're working on the table, because it's going to help those students who are on the other side. So once again, we'll do reptiles. Turn off my text tool, get this nicely centered on there. Close enough. Okay, so we'll go with that. And just like I did with the hotspots activity before, the easiest way to make this into a background for our activity is to highlight around everything we've created on the page. We're going to copy it, so I'm using my desktop shortcut, Control-C. Go back to my table here. Let me name my activity. We'll call this one Animals again. And then for my background, I'm going to choose Paste because I've already copied my background image. And then you just want to make sure that the items included in your crop are exactly what you want, and then click OK. So now I've got a background image with these boxes already made for those zones or regions or spaces, as I called them earlier. And now you can add them inside of the hot spaces activity up here in step 3. So I'm going to use the rectangle because it fits with the shapes that I made in my background. And I'm going to pull this around the existing rectangle that's here. Perfect. And then do one more over the other rectangle that I have. And let's say that I get a little bit further out than I wanted to go. I can go back to my select tool and I can choose to move this so that it better fits the size that I wanted. If I had gone completely haywire and wasn't happy with it at all, once again, if you click on it, you can use your red X to delete it. Go back and choose your tool and see if you can get your lines a little bit better defined this time. Perfect. And it is actually going to include these yellow boxes around the outside so that the students will easily be able to see the borders of these spaces. So now I'm ready to move on to my labels. For our previous example, we've done only text labels, and I said I would show you guys some examples of labels that had pictures included in them. So since I'm asking the students to sort the mammals and reptiles, for this one, I'm going to bring in pictures of mammals and reptiles. And once again, I'm just going to choose them from the Smart Gallery. So let's get a snake. This cute little guy right here is good. We'll click OK. And I like the crop on it. So we click OK, and you can see how it makes it an appropriate size. And once again, as we did with the hot spaces, all you have to do is put it into the correct region or zone, and you are building your answer key. So let's get a few more reptiles followed by a snake. All right, a few more reptiles, and then we'll get some mammals as well. All right, and drag him down here and make sure that he fits into the reptiles area. Let's see if we can find one more. I think if I remember correctly, a turtle is a reptile. If he's not, he's going to be for today's example, right? All right, he's already in the correct region. Let's go back and let's do some mammals. We'll take the same dog we did from the previous example. He works nicely. Put him up there in the mammals. And then I think we've got to get one more. Okay, and then make sure we place that one over in the mammals. As always, you can add audio, so if you want the students to be able to click on each of these labels and have the table tell them this is a pig, this is a horse, this is a dog, a lizard, a snake, a turtle, you can add the audio to each of these labels as you go. Same options we always have: read the label, spell the label, or that option to import your own audio. And then once again, have your instructions read across the bottom here by adding those. So let's preview this and see what the hot spaces activity will look like. It's opening my browser and loading my hot spaces activity. And just like hotspots, it begins with all of my labels just randomly tossed to the outside of the table. And then you can see these regions or borders that it's made around my shapes with these dotted lines right here. And the students will drag the items in. If they get an item in the wrong spot, the border around the outside stops spinning. So they immediately get the feedback that they've placed the wrong item in there as soon as that border around the outside stops spinning. And once they get all of the items in the correct place, they get the congratulations symbol, and the table would move on to the next activity for them. So in this tutorial, we looked at two of the activities, hotspots and hot spaces. Specifically, we focused on creating background images for these two activities. And my favorite way to do it, Smart Notebook, and just copy and paste. So thank you for watching this video tutorial.